Well, as Commissioner Adler mentioned, this is bittersweet for us. We're really thrilled to have Neal Cohen here with us during his last week with the Commission, especially when he starts to get in and demonstrate this great new tool that he and his department have developed for members. And we'll talk about that, and Neal will show that off in a few minutes. But it has been a tremendous asset to the toy industry. The work that Neal and his department have done over the last 7 years. I know he's worked with thousands of companies and many of you in this room and others in our industry, making sure that you have the ability to learn through his education and outreach efforts what you need to do to stay compliant and help your businesses either get started or grow. And it's been a tremendous asset over the last number of years. Prior to coming to the CPSC, Neal was a lawyer here in New York City, both a trial lawyer and a corporate lawyer, so he's kind of coming home when he comes up here to join us at Toy Fair. And he graduated with honors both from Emory University and Swarthmore University prior to starting his professional career. So this regulatory robot that Neal is going to demonstrate for everybody, he shared with some of us at TIA a few weeks ago, let us sort of do a walkthrough of it, and it really is going to be, I think, a tremendous help to all of you and something that we're very pleased that he can join us here today and demonstrate for you. So please help me give a Toy Fair welcome to Neal Cohen.
Thank you very much, Ed. I want to thank the entire TIA team for having me here today. Steve, Ed, Rebecca, Joan, Al, and Autumn, with whom we deal a great deal. So thank you. The picture on the screen is actually, I guess it's in front of me. Was that picture on the screen a minute ago? That's what I looked like before I came to CPSC and built the regulatory robot. And I've got a little gray hair and lost a little hair through the process, but you'll understand. Okay, so I really kind of loathe PowerPoints, but for today, sort of nature of the beast, I wanted to show off this tool, and I think it really goes to one of the things that Commissioner Burkle just mentioned, one of the small things we can hopefully do to make your life easier. There are regulations. We are a regulatory enforcement agency. Those regulations are there for a reason. They were hopefully based on data and incidents, which we often, our staff who's here, usually brings to a voluntary standards meeting and works collaboratively with industry and safety advocates to come up with a solution. Thank you. But there's a lot there. I mean, there's a lot of years of incidents and new types of products that come out, and so things change. But over the time, it's kind of hard to navigate that. And so what we tried to do was build a product. I'm going to run through the screens here in a moment. That will help. It's not going to replace everything. There's a lot of expertise and a lot of specialized expertise that you need to do what you do, and I know most of the folks in this room are likely compliance professionals or have a team of compliance professionals, and hopefully this will help. And if you're a small business and you don't have a team of compliance professionals, this should get you pretty close to in the neighborhood of the things that you need to be thinking about. So, without further ado, I did want to actually further ado for a minute. Just answering a question from a moment ago from the gentleman from West, the question about FTIR. I just wanted to address it and say that in the past, the Commission has tried using FTIR portable guns at import to screen for phthalates. We have found that the technology is not quite good enough yet for us to rely on that. So we are doing research work up at our lab. We're actually funding some of the makers to work specifically on the phthalates that we're interested in. And we're hopeful. We've dedicated some of the money from burden reduction towards finding an FTIR gun or software combination that works together so that there might be a way to really, because that's the cost that has really not come down. Since CPSIA began, lead testing, it costs money, but it's not a ton of money. But phthalates testing is, approximately $250 a pop. You multiply that per component, per toy, that's a lot of money for a small business. It adds up very quickly. So when I'm speaking to small businesses and they don't have any plastic in their toys, it's a very simple toy, and maybe they have a lead test, I tell them about some of the things that might be available to reduce their burden, like the small batch registry. But for most people, that might save them $100, $150, and that might be valuable to that person. But most of the people say, you know what, I'm just going to spend the $150 and just be above board. But when the phthalate piece comes up, it is very expensive, and so we have invested. If the technology works, it will be a big payoff, and we're really investing in that. And in terms of the other question about the Internet of Things, I think that's mostly in the realm of the Federal Trade Commission and about marketing to children and the collection of children's data, and also the FCC if there's actual transmission going on. But we still technically regulate it, but it's not one of the things at the top of our agenda right now. But I just wanted to kind of add a little bit to those questions. In terms of this, we could skip the agenda. All right, so we're going to go back to the future here a little bit. Anyone who's seen me speak before knows I like referencing movies, and again, I don't think I quite look like Michael J. Fox when this began, but we can hope. I wanted to show you when I took this job on in 2010, this is what the CPSIA website looked like. And if some of you in this room may remember this. There's a great website on the internet now. You can go back and find any website at a point in time. And so in preparing for this, I went back to that website. I was so thrilled when I saw this. I was like, yes, no one believes what it looked like, 5 years ago. And what it looked like was the commissioners at that time had a big mandate. Congress had said, implement the CPSIA. There were a ton of rules. There was a ton of rulemaking to do. And it was a very fast-paced set of affairs. And so what would happen is they would write a rule, or they'd stay a rule, and they'd do all this sort of inside baseball maneuvering. And then they'd throw it on a website, just right on top of each other. And if you were a small business and wanted to know, I'm making a stuffed animal. What do I need to know about this new CPSIA? You would probably find something about bicycle components on the top, because bicycle components were always on the top. So what we tried to do is, we've come a long way from there, and it's been a lot of work, and it's hard, it's complicated, and as you'll see, some of the policy concerns in trying to do this are getting it right. We want to be a nimble agency, we want to be a helpful agency, but we also want to get it right. We don't want to give poor advice, we don't want people to rely on bad advice. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. This is what the business education pages look like for the past couple of years. It's come a long way. It's not perfect by any stretch, but it at least gives you a step-by-step to orient you as to where you need to be. But in the past year, with the support of the commissioners, Burkle and Adler and the chairman and the other commissioners, we've put together our office, the Regulatory Robot, which is sort of an online artificial intelligence sort of program where you answer questions and we spit out a report that you can actually print and link to and rely upon to get you oriented as to what you need to do. So, some of you may remember this page as well. This is still up there. I think there's still work to be done here. But it lists regulations, but it doesn't provide context, right? And context is so important because the CPSIA didn't just say comply with this requirement. It talks about testing, it talks about certification, it talks about a high degree of assurance with the rulemaking we put onto it. So there's a lot of context and things to understand that just opening a book are not going to tell you. So here were some of the goals that I had for this project: that would do a better job of communicating the requirements, that it would take a company's willingness to comply and actually translate that into action. Because usually, when I have the pleasure of addressing an audience like this, everyone in here wants to comply. I mean, that's why you're taking time away from the floor to be here. But oftentimes, especially if you're a small business, you just don't know where to start. It's the how, not the desire. So that's what the goal was here. Put them in context. Understand that especially the people that I talk with, they're usually a one-person operation. I mean, they could be a 10-person operation. They can still have millions of dollars of revenue, but that's still a small company. When you think about revenue, when you think about a company with $10 or $15 million of revenue is likely not going to have a full-time compliance professional. It's going to be, oftentimes it's the person who does international shipping who suddenly has to do the compliance piece. And so we have to kind of understand where people are coming from. And I think the end is this actually does increase product safety. That's the goal of all the things that we do. Making things clearer can only help further that. So this is our little regulatory robot dude. People call him the Minion. I like him just because he's kind of welcoming. I try to do my best to make regulations as exciting as possible. It's a challenge. So at least you can begin with a smiling robot. And he's still smiling at the end, even though you may not be. All right. But this is the first time that we've put this all in context in one place on a government website. Now, of course, there's disclaimers, et cetera. We'll talk about those in a moment. But here are some of the other policy considerations. We want to be easy to understand, written in plain English, and legally accurate. We want to help businesses while also protecting the agency's interests, because we don't want to put something that's wrong up there and then be limited in our ability to go after someone who's a bad actor, right? None of us want that, because I think if you're in this room, I hope you are a good actor trying to do the right thing, but there are a very small percentage of people out there who are just trying to skirt the rules, and we have to have the tools in our arsenal to go after them. One of the things I had to do was obtain buy-in from key decision makers like the commissioners and the chairman to support this project, because there are risks associated with it. And then I had to do, as I write up here, because this is my last CPSC presentation, boring government stuff that you have to do, like data security and dealing with the bureaucracy of clearing and the internal hurdles and things like that. And that takes a long time, and that gets you a lot of gray hairs. But anyway, there's also exciting stuff, which is I'm kind of a technology geek, and so it was fun to make something new. It is totally based on a cloud platform, so it's not on CPSC servers. So if our servers go down, which they're known to do on occasion, this will still be up because it's out there in the cloud. Okay, so this is where you begin. It basically welcomes you, and it says, hey, this is a new tool for you. This is not the be-all and end-all, but this is a good starting point for your product safety journey that you're going to have to undertake, especially if you're new. And there's new entrants to the market, of course, all the time. We could run through it, and we have actually a Wi-Fi connection. I'm going to go through some screenshots, and if we have some time, I can show you, but the screenshots will probably just do the trick for today. The first thing which you have to do is, of course, accept the terms and conditions, as we all do all the time. Every time our MacBook is updated, you have to just accept the conditions, and so you have to accept our conditions as well. And these conditions are, as you might expect, you can't fully rely on this. We've done our best to make sure that it's accurate, but it does not replace the wise counsel of attorneys and consultants, et cetera. And if you don't agree to those terms, then you can't use it, okay? But that being said, we have really tried to take everyone in the agency who knows anything about any of these regulations and get them into the room and make sure that we're not getting anything wrong. Now, we're not perfect, and I know that at least one person in the room today, and I encourage this, by the way. I always play Stump the Chump, like on Car Talk on NPR, if you ever listen to that. Try to find the little nits in here, because there are some nits, because after you do something for a year, your eyes can't even see it anymore. So there's a word missing here or a comma missing there. Please send those to us or my colleague at the end. I'll give you his address at the end of the presentation, because we want to make this correct and we want to keep it up. And then when I'm no longer at the agency, we have committed to keeping it up. So when, after Al Kaufman speaks and the next update to F963 happens, this will be updated. I mean, the goal is to not just make this a one and done sort of affair. But I do want to sort of make a pitch while I'm up here as well, which is, if you think this is valuable, if you think this is useful, for those of you who have an opportunity to speak to commissioners or their staffs during the course of the year, wherever you might see them, tell them that this is valuable and tell them that it is worth investing in, because this was not a done deal. This was a challenge for me to get to be here. And I think my view of this is this is really a first-generation robot. Especially when we get to the toy page, which I do want to talk about. So let's say we accept the terms and conditions. I don't go through each question here because it gets a little tedious, but we ask you if it's a consumer product. We ask you is it a children's product. There's two different pathways down this. And there's an option to say, I don't know. And we provide you some guidance. And we also provide you the opportunity to contact our office. Some folks have asked me, is this just an opportunity to kind of shut down the conversation with CPSC? The answer is no. Our compliance staff, many of whom are here today, the Small Business Ombudsman Office, we're still here to take your questions. We want them to be better questions and more precise questions. It's better use of everyone's time if you can self-help and get most of the way there on your own. So in this situation, there's a drop-down menu that asks you to choose the age groups. Now, for those of you who actually really know, you'll see that there's actually an age group that should be 0 to 18 months and 18 to 36 months. What we've done here is we've combined the two of those, because often, just to give you an example of some of the challenges here, often the product is for both of those age groups, and you have to test to the more stringent requirement of each of those age groups depending on which test is applicable. So some of the nuances are captured sort of in the report page, not in the questions. And you'll also see, once we go through this, that there is no question that asks you, does your toy have lead in it? Okay? We do ask, does your toy have paint on it? Because that's an actual question that you can say yes or no to. But everything that you make unless it sits in the list of determinations, has to be tested for lead. So why ask you that question? We're going to tell you at the end anyway, you've got to test it for lead. Okay? So these are just some of the ways that we've tried to address some of the the nuances of the law. Okay, this is the children's toy page, which is actually pretty small. You know, it's just like, is it a toy, right? And we do have I don't know if we pop it out there, but there is a pop-up box that lists all the things in F963 that are excluded from the toy standard. And of course, that'll be updated as things change. The toy section you'll see in the report is a very lengthy section, and this is one area in particular that I think the 2.0 version could really be expanded upon. Because we know that there are 40-plus sections in the toy standard. Not every section applies to every toy. How do you figure out if that section applies to your toy? That was much more than I was willing or able to get sort of through this first round, because I had to be able to show the leadership at the commission that doing this is valuable and that doing it is not going to mean that we're sued the next day and the world is not going to end, because there are people who are very, government is very conservative in taking risks, and I understand the reasons. So this is really a proof of concept, but I hope that the toy section in particular could be expanded in future versions. This asks about child care articles. I'm going to go fairly quickly because I'm probably talking too much, as usual. These are a list of 104 rules, which are durable infant and product rules. And you just select a button. This section was a big challenge. I don't know what you can see on the screen, but the red says you're about 75% of the way through now. Okay? We don't have one of those little red bars because we don't know which pathway you're taking. So your journey could be very short, or it could be somewhat longer, depending if you're making, say, children's sleepwear. That would be a longer set of questions. But here, this asks you about the Federal Hazardous Substances Act, which is a very tricky one to try to ask you in a couple of quick questions. So what we did here was we took all of the regulations for the FHSA and we grouped them into categories that would make it a little bit easier to try to find yours. And so you can see, you can't totally see here, but they're broken out into flammable items, adhesives, general chemical use, and things like that. And they expand, and they're all listed there. Every regulation that we have on candles with metal cord wicks, it's all there. And then you can select it. Now, that doesn't mean that you're through the FHSA. There's a second part of the FHSA. There's a second question, which still asks, is your product toxic or corrosive or flammable? But actually, when you go through all of that, and we haven't shown you every screen here today just because of the time, you will have been exposed to pretty much every CPSC regulation that could likely be applicable to your product. And then it will produce a report like this one here. And you'll see at the top it says, you've indicated the title of this report is, I called it New Toy, okay? So you get to title your own report because you might run this report multiple times for multiple products. And you can save the report on your hard drive, and it's time, date stamped. So in the future, when things are updated, and someone comes running back to us and says, but you didn't tell us about this. And we say, well, that was 5 years ago, and you've now done something different, or we've done something different, so you do need to keep up. And I think everyone understands that you have an obligation to keep up with the law, right? As do we. So, but this is really cool. The green lines there are very clearly the user inputs. So we can't read your mind. We can't see your product. We ask you what your product is. We ask you about your product characteristics, and in turn, you tell us. And so we say, you said your product is a children's toy. You said your product is an art material, right? And sometimes the questions might seem a little repetitive. Well, I already said it's a toy. Why do I have to say why do I have to answer if it's an art material? Well, there are toys that can be art materials. There's wearing apparel that can be art materials. There's a million varieties of creativity that we see every day. And so we wanted to be over-inclusive and not exclusive. Expose you to a broader set of requirements. We got great, support from commissioners, all of the commissioners, Commissioners Burkle and Adler and Maharovic and Robinson, but also this wonderful feedback from the chairman that we were very proud of, because it was really a lot of effort to bring this product out. Don't know why that slide's there. Okay, now this is the website where you can always find it, business.cpsc.gov, and you can actually jump right to it, business.cpsc.gov/robot as well. As was mentioned earlier, I am leaving CPSC, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to TIA to still be allowed to present this product today. I'm very proud of it. And so obviously I'm sad to go. I'm thankful to CPSC, to its leadership, to its staff, many of whom are here, for a wonderful journey I've had there, and it's time for my next adventure. My colleague, Will Cusey, I wanted to introduce that name to you, will be keeping the office running until my successor is appointed and named. And here's some other reference materials that are up here. So make sure there's nothing else I missed in running through that. Now, I think I will also say that, I think having the commissioners here this morning was very important because it does show the variety of things that CPSC does. Whenever I have the good fortune to go to a lot of different industry association events, whether they be trade shows or other events, and everyone thinks that all we do is whatever that industry is, right? And that's a natural thing. Like, the toy industry thinks we are CPSC toy regulators, but we are also CPSC ATV regulators and CPSC promotional product regulators and CPSC, we do crumb rubber. There are so many different things going on. And so sometimes when the question is asked, well, why is CPSC doing it this way? Because it doesn't make sense for us. The answer is because we have to think incredibly broadly about all the different industries that we regulate. But to Commissioner Burkle's point, we need to hear back from you. The communication is so key, whether directly to the commissioner's office or through an office like mine, because we do get the opportunity to speak to the commissioners on a frequent basis and convey those concerns back up to the policymakers. So this was a great, and I also want to congratulate TIA on Playfair because I did get to take my children there yesterday, and it was awesome. We got to build some lightsabers and joust. So I'm happy to take any questions, or depending on how we're doing on time, Ed.
That's great, yeah. And let me just echo, if you don't have occasion to interact with the commissioners or their staff, we hope that you will try out this tool. Feel free to provide TIA staff any thoughts or feedback you have, and we'll make sure we get it to Neal's successor or to any of the commissioners' offices, because we do think it has a lot of potential and really could be a benefit to a lot of our members. So if we can help, advance the progression of this tool, make it better, make it as accessible and helpful to you all, we'll do our part as well. So with that, Neal does have time for a question or two. Again, folks are up with microphones. If anybody has a question about the regulatory robot, here's a chance to ask Neal, or any other questions that you want to throw at Neal. Here's one here, Rebecca, right here in the front. Thank you.
Will the regulatory robot only apply to U.S. standards, or will it also give information for international standards?
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Okay, thanks. Well, first, only U.S. standards, because CPSC is only in charge of regulating U.S. But it's a good question because I think another real opportunity here for a future version is to incorporate the voluntary standards that Commissioner Adler spoke at length about. Because when I showed this off to a lot of our staff, people would say to me, well, what about window coverings? For those of you who don't know, we have a huge problem with window coverings and children becoming entangled in window coverings. And the answer is, believe it or not, we don't have a mandatory standard on window covering blinds yet. There's a very strong voluntary standard, and there's lots of strong voluntary standards that I think should be incorporated into a future version of this. So there are ways of making it even more powerful, but no, we don't have no plans for an international. There are other sort of private things out there that might do that. Thanks for your question.
Time for one more. Anybody have another question? Well, Neal, on behalf of the entire industry, I really want to thank you for your time at the agency, and I know everyone wishes you well as you start off on your new venture. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,